Hello, everybody. So, welcome to this panel with Jan David Freund to my right side, who's telling you about why don't we want to make games look educational. Or at least too educational. Please applause for Jan David Freund.
So, of course, I'm not here today to tell you that board games are amazing as educational tools. I hope that's preaching to the choir, and you all know that already. So, I would just assume that we agree on that. So, instead, for the rest of the talk, we will build on that basis. So, that was the first thesis. It was an easy one. The second, I'm hoping that you're getting for this as well. The effects of these board games are better if they're not made in an educational way. They should not be designed to be educational. So this is a bit more provocative. And this does not mean that all educational games are bad. I've seen a lot of great games over the years. I've seen a lot of great games outside here which have this educational appeal. But if you have a game that is kind of educational, you always should have a close look whether the fun part of the game is valid in it. So also, please, all school teachers, don't be afraid. It's okay to have learning games in your teaching materials. Please use games to inspire your teaching materials. And if you want, just consult the search engine of your choice for gamification in education. It's a ton of great inspirations and also a lot of evidence how this can work out very well. So we don't want educational games, but this does not mean that we don't want them at all, but we don't want them in this kind that I'm going into it. So instead, and here we come to my third and main message for today, you should aim for the games that are designed to be fun, but at the same time, you should choose those that are really challenging for the children. So they should stimulate them, not bore them, and at the same time, they should be engaged when playing them. But before I dive into that, I have another burning question for you. I think so, at least. Who am I, and why should you listen to me? So I have this introduction slide that I should have. So yes, my name is on top. Kevin also mentioned it. And after my studies in psychology and some intriguing minors as well, I made my PhD in the field of developmental psychology with research on child development, early childhood education, and quality of learning environments. And since 2019, I've been supporting the Haber Family Group with varying responsibilities and roles, but always with an advisory task for our departments, such as the product development involving all the product development for games. And to name some other activities, I was also involved in all the educators' days so far, not always with the talks, only my second talk, and also had a co-speaking role at the Spielklima 2022, which was very interesting because we focused on how board games can be a very good tool to communicate education for sustainable development. There was a great talk yesterday about the topic as well. And somehow I was given the honor to be a co-author for the chapter of child games in the upcoming board game reference book of Christoph Post and Jürgen Kahler. And finally, I gathered quite some first-hand experience on playing with children, with my own children, and with their friends in their school and kindergarten. So I have some knowledge about child development, supplemented with experience from the board game industry. But I must admit that my focus of expertise is rather for the younger children. So it's rather the age of under 7, but fear not. Also, all the school teachers here in the room will also get some information that is very good for them. And another thing before we dive into the meta, I will not use specific board games as examples today. In both cases, if I would say something about our own games or speak about our competitors, that would be whether positive or negative, I think I would regret it, so I just avoided it all. Instead, I use the magic of AI art, which is very available today. Had a lot of fun with prompts in preparation for this talk, and will never talk about specific games. But trust me, I've played really hundreds of games. It's based on these actual games, but I will not mention if I say something good or bad, what games could do. Okay, so there are situations that can withstand easily reaching for an ill-fitting board game. So for example, if you're playing with your friends, it can even be hilarious. Picking a bad-fitting board game, you can have a lot of fun seeing the game, trying it and saying, oh, there's a lot of flaws, doesn't fit. You can really laugh about that. And sometimes there are situations where you really seek the assuring comfort of a game that really fits. And it's a pity if you don't get this. This kind of comfort. It's very unpleasant, but it's not more. Critical are those situations, I call them the all or nothing situations, in which you must convince someone that games are great, especially the games that you choose. Because you, as educators, tabling a game, yeah, especially for the first time, the group typically, yeah, it's one of those situations. It's all or nothing, and you are suspicious to bring games that look like fun, but actually are learning. So you have to really convince that you're doing good stuff, that you know good games. So it's one of these situations in the middle. Well, you don't want to present learning in disguise. You want to present fun, which is learning inside. So children love to play, but they don't know for sure whether they love to play your games. That's the critical point. You have to convince that you're a good game picker. If the games are too easy, the children are bored and not boosted. And if the game is too difficult, the children cannot play how they want, cannot fulfill their goals in the game, and so they are not fostered but frustrated. So the tricky thing is how to find those games and also make, I hope that some game developers are listening as well, how to find and make the right games for children at a specific step in development. So imagine this situation, you're with a group of children, you have this shelf of games, and now you have to make this kind of matching game and find the right game for this situation. So what would you come up, what is first information? If you have to do it very quickly, what would be the first information that you would choose? Mostly, I think you would go for the age recommendation. So I will first go into that before I talk about other aspects. The idea of game age recommendations is quite appealing. From the idea, it's whoever created and edited the game should be an expert on what children can and need at which age. And these experts and no one else decided early in the process for which age group the game fits best. And this decision is guided the rest of the design process. And not to forget, there are dozens of children of exact that age who playtested the game along the way. So it's really proof that this is exactly the game for that age. But after years of experience in the board game industry, I would say it's less than 5% of the games that really fulfill this ideal. There are a lot of compromises you have to make along the way. Most of the games are somewhere in between, but you never know if a specific game, what was the basis for the age recommendation. And even if you have a very good age recommendation, it's just one small number on the box, and it's just a very rough orientation. Since even if there were dozens of children involved, the children sitting next to you doesn't really have to match to those children. So it's still complicated. And I could easily speak for the next hour or hours about the shortcomings of age recommendations. I won't do, that's not the topic for today. But if you're interested, I want to recommend, then there was an episode of the Beeple Talk. It's a podcast. Unfortunately, it's a German podcast. So for all of you who don't speak German, instead, just get in contact with me. But in this podcast, a dear colleague of mine, a former colleague of mine, Robin Eckert, now he's working for Frosted Games, he was invited to talk about age recommendations. And in preparation, we had a very thorough discussion about the whole topic. And he brought up a lot of the points that we were discussing there. So if you're German speaking, have a look at this podcast. Really great. Really brings a lot of those shortcomings and aspects that really don't work about age recommendations. So I don't want to leave you empty-handed. Age recommendations are there. You will read them. You will have to interpret them. So there's one point for the publishers and game editors. Just consider, no matter how well thought your recommendations are, don't expect them to be read the way that you meant them, but instead expect furious mails with complaints. That's the usual way it is. And for all users, be it professionals, be it families, use age recommendations as a very quick orientation. So just for a first look, just to decide, is this age 10, is it age 5? So very first orientation, it's good for that, but nothing more. Please never use games as a tool of assessment of a child is well developed for its age. That they are not really good for that. You have to be really an expert to use games for that. And especially never allow that someone uses a bad age recommendation or a bad fit based on the age recommendation to play less board games. Okay, I think never someone should say play less board games in the future, but age recommendations that did not work well, yeah, so that was one game. That's not a good reason to say, we don't do board games. We played this for 5 and my child is already 6, so I don't play board games. That's not a good reason. So please don't do that. So this, you should take away this, and for everything more, get into contact or listen to the podcast. So, but what else? What do we have as information? What are the 10 hidden codes of board game publishers that really give you what you need? Yeah, to make it short, there is no easy way. It's not that simple. I'm sorry. Yeah, children develop at very different speeds. So you cannot simply tell by the age or by the class what they are able to do. So you would have to assess the specific game-specific competence of the children to say really what is fitting there. So that's just not realistic. Instead, you usually work with groups of children. They have a variety, a diversity of skills, skill levels. And then, of course, there are also situational effects in a group effects. So this is really complicated to go this way. So you cannot really use it this way. You cannot say this game has it on the box that says that this works for these children. So if there's no straight and safe way, like I said, it's like a matching game, and there should not be one straight, safe way to win this game. Instead, it's a bit something to think. So instead, you would have to, in some way, strengthen your consumer competences to get into the game. So you have to really know more, use the game, read it, try it, test it, and that's what I'm going for. So instead of a shortcut, I brought you 3 typical flaws that you should avoid when looking for games, and 3 advice on how to select and use the right games. So let's start with the flaws. The first flaw is this one. I called it Jack of all trades and master of none. A lot of children's games these days come with these claims. So it's a good thing to have these claims. They are a shortcut. They give you some insight. But if the games are plastered with these things, it's not so good. So obviously, these icons are reproduced. So I didn't use icons from real games, but I was inspired by real games. And actually, the half of these icons is inspired by one single game. So this game was really plastered with icons. And you can easily think that which one would match on one game. And I won't tell which game it was, only so much, it was none of ours. And it wasn't really not that encouraging to have a closer look at this game. In my experience, such an abundance of claims on the box is pure showcasing. So you should rather make you cautious and ask you some questions. For example, is this game still made with a focus on fun, which is very important? If the game is not engaging, the children won't play it. They won't learn anything. They will only be frustrated. Then how much of this is stating the obvious? And what is a real boon of the game for this specific game and not every game? Is the game really like Jack of all trades? Is it really master of none? And especially, do these people know what they're talking about? So let's have a closer look. I highlighted some to just explain what should make you suspicious when you're reading this. Learning colors. Sounds nice, yeah? But this was from a 4+ game. So at that age, children either don't have the ability to learn to differentiate color because they have some kind of impairment with visual abilities, or they know the colors. Basically, color learning is kind of language learning. Children don't have to learn that this is red and green because they are not really that different in a way. It's just something that they have to name. So you don't have to make a game to let children learn colors. Then the next one, yeah, distinguishing shapes. Yeah, that's innate also. So you don't have to teach the children to distinguish shapes. If you would like to have them teach how the shapes are called, that's something different, but you wouldn't do that with 4+. Whatever else. Yeah, we have the Steam. Looks very great. So, wow. All those 5 in one game, actually. It was printed on the box, so the game should really foster all 5 of the Steam competences, but actually, is that realistic, or is that showcasing? And over there, another one here, we have this, yeah, let's test my dexterity. Dexterity and fine motor skills. Very cool, the game has both, but they mean the same. So, yeah, whoever made this did not think about it or did not know what this dexterity and fine motor skills really know. So we can quite well see that these people are not, yeah, they were not quite experts. So if you read this, these things on the boxes very closely, that tells you a lot, but not necessarily how good the game is, but rather with which purpose and intention it was made. So this is my first lesson for you from flaw number 1. Avoid games that exaggerate their qualities. If a game has like 2, 3, 4 of these, it's still fine. Read them closely. use your brain. Is it some way plausible? Is this rationale of the buttons? Is it really interesting? Like, for example, yeah, it's recommended by educators. Yeah, can be a nice thing. So that's not bad. If it has this kind of badge, that's a good thing. But if it's plastered, rather be cautious. Number 2, if you use those icons, that's okay. That's a good thing. But what you won't do is do it in preparation. Don't do it in front of the children. Don't show, hey, I have this cool game. It has like 5 badges on it. It's excellent for learning. So the next thing is not another rant about education and games, but I want to go into the pitch you make for the game. So what you won't do is you will not focus. So I have this like this pose. We have bad pitch and a good pitch. And for the bad pitch would, for example, yeah, today I'm going to teach you something with this great board game. And this is kind of difficult. I won't go for that one. And better on the upper end of the scale, pitch the game, same time something like, I brought along an experiment and it's exciting. I used it with other groups. They loved it. I'm curious whether you are ready for it. I'm sure you are because you're so clever. So we'll try this challenge. So try to make it sound exciting and an adventure and show your enthusiasm for the games because that will really spill over to the children. But it's also important to set a serious tone. Maria Montessori once said that playing is the work for children. So make clear that you are using this in a serious context and that we will now take it very serious to play this game, which is fun, but we are all serious about this. So we're not running around, throwing the pieces and so on. This will also help the children handle the components better, and then you're more likely to bring another game to the classroom. So still, there are some educational games that cannot hide what they are. And for these games, for example, with the load of those badges on the box, what do you do with those? Yeah, avoid to bring them. That's mostly avoid to bring the box, so don't show it to the children because it sends the wrong signals. They should not see it as something to learn, but as a nice game to play. Or if you already, instead of not bringing them, don't buy them or don't even publish them. It's like the whole way. I think my philosophy is that learning really belongs in the DNA of the games and not on their cover. So it should be really integrated in all the mechanisms and all the thematics, the topics. There should be the learning, but it should not really say, hey, learning here, but it should just happen while playing and having fun. So don't expect that the games tell aloud what they stimulate. And therefore, my second tip is avoid games that rub the learning in the face of the children. And while I don't want games to be too educational, the opposite is not good either. Some think that making a game for children means to take out everything difficult and guarantee success, so that no child, and especially no parent, is frustrated when playing the game, because everything works out well, everyone wins the games, and everything is fine. Well, but you better know than me that there always are children who don't know how to roll a dice. So you could say, let's make the games as easy as possible. So it's only about rolling the dice and that's the game. But yeah, of course, games in educational context should better be easy to learn and explain, but not without a challenge. So don't use the games this way. Instead, some people who did not understand this had a different opinion, and this resulted in some kind of incomprehensible fashions in the game design. One, for example, is to avoid numbers and letters. It's true, some children have difficulties in learning the meaning of these symbols, but hiding the symbols is not a good way to handle this either. So instead, help those children and present the things, because only by presenting the children get used to it and overcome the difficulties they have. So for example, to play a matching game, children only have to compare how the things look. So a number or a letter is as easily to compare to another one as a symbol is. A symbol of a flower is not more difficult to compare to another flower, like an A to an A, for example. But this way, the children get used to it. So the same goes for the dots on a dice in roll and move games. It's a trend to change them into move to the next icon or color of that kind. Why? Rolling, counting, moving, counting, that's a great thing. So I don't know why. From my perspective, you should always use those dots because it's one of the best ways for young children to bring them into contact with counting and math. I have these 3 dots on my dice, and I want to go exactly those spaces. I can really see 1 dot, 1 space. It's a great thing for the beginners. Don't take it out of the games. It's not necessary. And finally, color coding the correct answer. It's a bad habit. I don't know why it came up. In some quiz games, it's like there is this correct answer. Like, for example, here the animals. We have a child animal and an adult animal, and there are pairs, and you have to think about that. Which animal belongs to which? But if you color code it, and that's the trend to do this, the children won't look for the animals. It's still, of course, it's more difficult, but the children can learn this, and it's not too difficult for the children, but they have to think about it. And if you have this color coding, they won't think about it. They will go the easy way. So these are just some examples, and I'm sure that you know games that do something like this. But actually, the thing is, most effective learning doesn't happen in your comfort zone. Children feel that, and their curiosity drives them to try and learn what they can't do yet. And indeed, the most effective learning happens in your zone of proximal development. And since you're educators, I hope that at least some or most of you know this concept, but still I'm explaining it very shortly. So the zone of proximal development contains all the skills that you have not yet mastered yourself, but you can perform if someone helps you. And the concept of scaffolding is the term used in psychology for this kind of help, so that you're elevating someone to go for the next step. And here is just one example, but you can think of many more. If you have seen children, how they can thrive and do interesting things they were not able alone, but with a little help, so much is possible. And this kind of support is the best support you can give to the children. And the thing with the, I call dumbed down games, that they stay in the comfort zone. So they don't try to scaffold the children, don't try to introduce something new, but they keep it all cozy and easy, but that results in that children are just rehearsing things that they already know instead of learning something new. And games that really match should be in the area in between. So a bit of comfort zone is always good. You feel the comfort, you want to play the game, but you should always be also in the zone of proximal development with a good game. So here, the result is avoid games that don't take children seriously. So, and this was a lot of negativity, so I want to change the perspective and now go for the positive aspects, and here come my 3 advice. I don't know whether you know these things. Some parents here, parents know these things. Do you know what makes them special? Here's a little hint. These bodysuits have a nice feature. If the children grow, they grow along. So they don't have only one size. And it's a feature that games can have as well. Unfortunately, most games lack this feature. They are very specific and they foster a competence on a very specific level. They are really to the point and do something, but it's difficult to go along even 1 year in school with one game because the children only are fostered, like, for example, 4 weeks, and then they master the thing, and then the game is useless for them. It's okay if you have like money to buy a lot of games so that you can spend the full school year with like 30, 40 games. But if you don't, it's always better to have something more flexible. And that's what I call the grow-along games. These games have modules or variants or handicaps, whatever helps to vary the challenge the children are faced with when playing the games. And the idea is that if a child outgrows or masters the current level, you have something to introduce. Oh, you mastered this, then try the next one. Another alternative are games that have more than one way to solve them. I think you all know this from expert games, that there's not only one way. We all go for this, we all rush to build a tower, but instead you can go the science path or exploration path. There are different ways to win the game. And in children's games, that's also possible, that there's more than one way to win the game. You can have different strategies. And they also can be of various, not only one difficulty, but they can be more and less challenging. And this way you can go to the children and say, this time you master the pineapple strategy, and next time you try the houses, because I think that you are ready to do it. Or if you have children of different different levels of competence, you can start with it to level it, so that the children can play even if they have different levels. in the beginning. And of course, a lot of games, and I can't emphasize this enough, a lot of games emphasize on soft skills and meta competencies such as focus, planning, communication, and these remain much longer relevant. So of course, it's nice to really have a focus on, for example, a mathematical concept and foster this with a game. But if you foster something like focus or thinking ahead or communication, the children will profit from that much longer. So as often as you can, go for those games, because these are the soft skills that are not really covered in the usual school teaching ways, so to say. And so the games really can here bring a benefit that is really necessary, because the children need this for educational success. So then number 2, I would recommend you to test the games. So I know I promised you to enable you to know which games before you buy them, but sometimes really you have to test them before you know. So the best thing is that you test the games in a situation that is close as possible to the one which you want to use the games, with age group and group size and setting, but I know that this is not realistic in most cases. So for these situations, it's also fine to play a game with other adults, maybe fellow educators, and it's still very helpful to play the game alone, on your own, and try it before you bring it to the class. Because you want to ask yourself what competences are relevant in the game. And as you know, the badges on the box, the icons, won't tell you this necessarily. What aspects could disrupt the game situation? Really try to think of the situation in which you want to play the game. And if there are some aspects that really could smash the children out of the game, out of focus on the game, that's also difficult. And prepare yourself so that you are, I call it, first turn ready pitch in less than 1 minute, so that you're able to bring the game on the table and you're able in less than 1 minute to explain what the children can do in their first turns. You don't have to explain everything. They don't have to know how the game ends or what are the victory conditions, but they should be able to start playing. And if you have no time for testing, then look out for expert recommendations. Because instead of the badges, which are often made for promotional reasons, these expert recommendations are based on tests. So they tested the games for you. And here are just some examples, like the Brettspiel Academy in Germany, or Imagination Gaming in the UK, Pen and Pion in the Netherlands, or weareteachers.com in the USA. And we ourselves are also working on giving more and more recommendations for games. And finally, number 3. So you have the right games at hand. You learned and tested them, you brought them along and pitched them excellently. So what comes next? The children play. And what do you do in that moment? And I brought you, like the first picture, I hope that you don't do it like the wise owl. In so many adventures, you have this wise owl giving you some advice, go to the old oak, and so on. And then they're flying away and leave you alone with that. Even if you have questions or the owl is away, you can't ask. That's not so nice. Be ready to hear whether some questions asked. Everything clear? Can you try it? And so on. But please don't overdo it either. Don't guide the children through every move in the game. We really had a lot of fun with prompts. Don't go with every move of the game. Leave the children some space to try the game, and even make something that is not okay in the game to fail, to go into a fail state. You can correct that later. So don't be too close. Instead, my picture of you in the classroom is that of this penguin. So it was really hard to get the AI to create this plate rotation thing, because it really always tried to do some other things with juggling and so on. But the idea of this plate rotation is that you don't have to be there every moment. The plates still rotate even if you don't rotate them actively. But in the beginning, you have to bring them to a spin. So that's the idea of the penguin. First, get all the tables going. So pitch, short explanation, pick a starting player. That's also very important, because they will argue about who's the starting player if you don't get clear with that. Then answer the most urgent question, and then head for the next table. And as soon as all tables play, go for another round. Go back to the first table and see whether something is happening, everything's fine, everyone in the game, or if there's someone not going along or whatever. And maybe then you use the chance to introduce another rule. So you start very simple, and then you can add, okay, now here's another dice. Use this as well, and this does this and that. So go for an easy pitch that they can start for the first 2 minutes to play the game and get into the game, feel the game. And then you can go to the other tables and make your round. And this might sound like a lot, but actually I have seen this in practice and it worked really very, very well. And just imagine the flow you can have. You surfing the wave, all the children engaged and enthusiastic, and a little question here and a big cheer there. This can really be a great situation for all of you. And if a game is finished, you encourage a re-round. Usually that's a nice thing. And you can then, of course, introduce something a bit more challenging, depending on how well the round played the games. Or you have another game. So bring enough games so that you can see, oh, I don't think that the group really liked the game. Let's try this one. So be flexible in these situations. So the time is nearly up for my talk. And you might have some questions and objections. But before you get the chance to bring your own questions up, let's first fake me one. So thank you for this entertaining and enlightening talk. But have you considered that we as practicing experts have no time to follow all these tips? Instead, we are masters in observing children, detecting if things go into a critical direction, and improvise a solution to get the kids back on track. How are we supposed to make any practical use of all this? Well, that's an excellent question. Thank you. Of course, I know and admire really your qualities that you get from your practical experience as educators. And I know that time for preparation is really sparse and that you are already loaded and with all that it takes to do your daily business. So please understand all of my tips only as some support for you and your great work. Maybe some of them ideas are relevant for you, maybe they can inspire you in certain situations, but don't feel constrained. So I'm not proposing the psychological rules that should guide everything you do with board games. It's just some inspiration and ideas. So, and speaking of constraints, I have one final tip for you, for all the pros who already feel confident about playing the games in the educational context. Dare to deviate from the rules. The rules are just an inspiration for you. All the game components are also just an inspiration. If you have the feeling that the game should be like, you should play it as a team game, like don't have 4 players, why not have 8 players, always working in pairs of 2, discussing every decision. Makes it a communication game, makes it an interesting game. They have to argue about this. Or if you have the feeling that, yeah, there's a 5th child wanting to play along, it's only for 4 players, check whether that's possible. Don't feel too constrained about the games. The games that really work well for your situation are most likely not designed for this purpose. So only use the games as the basis. You are the experts on situations that really work with the children. So, okay, I think there are some minutes left maybe for 1 or 2 real questions. I don't know. Yeah, so I'm happy to answer them. And unfortunately, the Educator's Day is nearly over. But after my talk, I will be at our table out there and also happy to talk with you if you want to get in contact. Thank you.
Coming.
Hi, I think my question goes along with what you were just saying. It pertains mostly to how you would feel about games that claim to involve the whole class. A game that is not for 6 players, it's for 20 players or plus or something like that. I've seen in a lot of alternative education schools that use a technique, I mean, not so much a technique as like a general practice of having focus times with different groups of kids. So they go and play with 6 kids and they give all their focus while the rest of the class has been trained and knows what to do in the meantime. So it's not really a matter of you have to manage 30 children the whole time. I'll leave it.
Yeah. Of course, it's preferable if you have only one group of children and you can focus on them. It's easier. And the other situation that you described, these whole class situations, this can really also work very great. It depends on the game. So some games really work this way. Like for example, okay, this is an example from us. So sorry, I just say we didn't. But for example, with Aukaruba, it's the principle that one is holding up a piece and everyone else will use the same piece at the same time. And of course, this works very great with classes. So everyone needs a board, of course. You can't go with only one copy, but they can all do it at the same time and see the results. Or how's it called? It's a Take It Easy. So there's another game working in a very similar way. This Karuba, and also this also works with the whole class. And there are other examples to go with this way. it always depends. You have to see whether it's really engaging for the whole class and everyone focused on the same thing, and it's not like just teaching and I'm not interested in playing the game. But yeah, that can really work out well. These penguin situations are much more interesting, but also they take more from you. You have to see whether this works with your class. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's better that way because we are recording.
I did not know. Yeah, hello. Quick question on my part. I was just wondering, because earlier on you were talking about the fact that games that basically advertise to the whole world that, hey, I'm education, use me at school, I'll teach your kids grammar, for example, right? That is probably not the way to go. Or at least that's how I
At least you have
understood
to be
it.
cautious about these games. Yeah.
And now I was just wondering, of course, I mean, I love board games. That's one of the reasons why I'm here, and I love using them. But at the same time, I often feel like, okay, most of the skills that the kids might learn are kind of like the soft skills in between, or like you have to cooperate, they have to learn rules. I mean, as an English teacher, if they use English, then I'm happy anyway. But I was just wondering, what do I do if I'm actually looking for a game that's specifically focusing on an aspect that is part of my subject, but at the same time I'm told to stay away from games that seem to be too schooly, I guess?
Yeah. I want to stay away from those games, but have a very close look. So you have to be very cautious that the games still should be focused on fun, so that the children have a good time. You don't want them to learn that games in school are just another way to be taught in classical, boring ways. So just have a very close look whether the game is also fun. If it's fun and challenging and fitting to your subject, perfect, go for it. But from my experience, oftentimes those games focusing on education lack the fun. So yeah, but I don't want to say that you shouldn't use educational games. They can be great. I've seen great examples.
So, thanks, Jan David. So, if you want to meet him outside, he's at the Harvest stand. And give an applause, please.